anytime I had to pivot or do something,
Hmm.
she just they always said, like, anytime you love it and you want to do it, it's always worked out. The stuff that hasn't worked out was just things that you had the opportunity and you said yes, and you weren't in love with it and it didn't quite fit. Opposed to when anything ever like came, she said, like, anything that came directly out of you, it was your idea and you wanted to do it. It's always worked out. It's like, oh, so I guess it's true. So, and it is true. Like, if you love it, go ahead and make the thing. Just make it. Just do whatever you
Yeah.
have to do.
Open the podcast bay door as hell.
Hello, everyone. These are the Welcome to Geektown interviews. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. This week, we're continuing the interview with Judd Winick, who was gracious enough to give me over 2 hours of his time to sit down over Zoom and talk about his career. In this episode, we will talk quite a bit about his time on the real world and how that opened many doors for him, from his second syndicated comic strip, Frumpy the Clown, and then into his work writing comic books for Marvel and DC. Primarily DC. But we get there in a little roundabout way, as I first ask him about Frumpy. Now, there was one other comic strip you did, Frumpy the Clown.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that fit into your history there?
That's a very, very important part of my history on a lot of levels. So post Real World, we'll just jump. So, gang, I went on the Real World. I was on reality TV. One of my housemates her name was Pam Ling. We fell in love after the show. We got married. We have 2 kids. There's a brief one. But as far as Frumpy the Clown, yeah, after the Real World, I literally got a call from Creator Syndicate via I forget if they actually called if they called the network, meaning if they called MTV,
right?
Or if they had reached out to my reps, or like like I had an agent, which I there was several representations ago. I think they just called MTV, like, we'd like to talk to Judd Winick about blah, and I had a gig illustrating the Complete Idiot's Guide series, which is kind of the knockoff version of the Dummies Guide. So I was doing pretty well. That was a job. It was a good job. They paid me money to draw little illustrations, and I did a lot of them, like a couple of hundred of these books. They paid me very well, probably too well, to be honest with you, for the work they were getting, in my opinion. But yeah, Creator Syndicate they called me and said, are you interested in doing a syndicated comic strip? And I told them, quite honestly, that's all I've ever wanted to do my entire life. And I said, I have 2 comic strips for you. One, this is my college strip. And then I did a spin-off version with just one character who was in Nuts and Bolts, called Frumpy the Clown, where he moves in with a nuclear family. So I sent them both. They said, oh, we like the Frumpy one with the family, because syndicates like family strips.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got syndicated. That's owed entirely to the fact that I went on television. Way back when I did the show, we had 2 directors, George Verschoor and Bob Fisher, and George Verschoor told me, when we had finished filming and and basically everyone's leaving, he gave me advice. And I should mention that George didn't like me back then, because I knew too much about television. I think he didn't like that, like, you seem to know how things work around here, and I don't like that. We're supposed to be just doing this documentary series, but we got along fine much later. But he gave me advice,
Mm-hmm.
which was that the real world will open doors for you, but you're going to have to walk through them. And that was really important, because that definitely kept my eye on the ball, that I got to talk to all kinds of stupid people about all kinds of stupid things. But I mean, where it finally wound up, I mean, I came into doing the Real World wanting to be a cartoonist, and that's what finally happened. I didn't become a TV host. I didn't become an actor. I didn't, like,
Become a VJ.
nothing, none of that. And it was discussed, and I took meetings and I did these things, and none of that shit worked out at all. And frankly, every time I would go to some place, like, I got sent out to possibly host things. And for me, I was thinking like, if I can make money being some guy who like stands up in front of a camera and says something, and then I could like that will pay the bills while I like work on what I really care about. I mean, that was the
Mm-hmm.
plan, but none of that shit worked out. I mean, because I wasn't particularly adept at speaking on camera like that. And every time I went to one of these interviews, they would just want to talk about the real world. It was a novelty at the time. So,
Right. Yeah.
it's like, you know, here we are, like maybe you'll host this dating show. It's like, okay. It's like, but like, so what was it actually like shooting the show? Like, these are professional people make television shows, but they have no idea how reality TV works because we're so new. So they want to talk about that. So Frumpy the Clown came about because of that. And then I finally got to do exactly what I always wanted to do. I was doing a syndicated comic strip.
Nice.
And you work 6 weeks ahead. Maybe it's 3 weeks ahead and 6 weeks for Sundays because it's got to be colored.
Oh,
Or
okay.
is it 6 weeks, 8 weeks? I don't remember. It's been so long. But you did have a fair amount of lead time. And that was okay. It takes years to develop an audience. I started out in about 15 papers, which is a healthy launch. You got to be like in 40 or 50 papers to actually make a living because you literally get paid by the number of papers you're in.
Right.
And it was a good start. I lost some papers, gained some papers, but in that mix, again, we don't have to do the whole real world. If they don't know about it, I think they almost should look at it elsewhere. But I'll say briefly.
I do have. I'll just tell you, I have a couple of questions about the real world, but I will not
Well, no,
focus
I'm
on
I'm
that
fine talking
heavily.
about it, but like it's so much to cover. You know what? I'll do it like this. Ready? Okay. So as part of what I do, I when I go on a book tour, I do children's books for those who don't know. I do the Hilo series. When I go to book tour, I don't go to bookstores. I go to schools, and I do assemblies. I do presentations. That's the greatest thing in the whole world. Everybody should do an assembly. It's the best. Kids love not being in class. You get 300 kids who don't want to, who suddenly get out of class for an hour, and I'm just
Yep.
talking about like cartooning and Hilo and superheroes and stuff. Like, I'm so lucky
You're
and
a
blessed.
rock star.
Oh God, they love it so much. And in all modesty, I'm very good at it. They have a good time in that. At many points, I talk about the real world. And so, all right. So yes. So gang, I'm going to talk to you like you're in third grade. So 31 years ago, I was on a reality TV program called The Real World, which was on MTV. The plot of the show is they take seven strangers from around the country, put them up in a house for 6 months and film them. It's not a game show. There's no contest. You just live your life. You come and go as you please. You're not even stuck in the house. And they film you. It's kind of a documentary. One of my housemates on the show was a young man named Pedro Zamora. Pedro was a 22-year-old AIDS educator and gay activist from Miami. He was originally from Cuba. He came over from Cuba when he was 10 years old and was raised in Miami. And he was an AIDS educator. And he was an AIDS educator because he was living with HIV/AIDS. And I was about to break into explaining what HIV/AIDS is because you're in third grade and I explain it to kids what it is. So Pedro was living with AIDS and Pedro was an AIDS educator, quite a good one. Um,
Hmm.
but Pedro went on the real world because he wanted people to see what it was like, to really see what it was like. This is 31 years ago.
Yeah.
And most people had never seen anyone really who was living with AIDS. And he wanted to show them. And by going to the real world, I can't overstate what a monumental event it was. He reached millions of people. Millions of people actually understood what it was like. Millions of people loved him for who he was. It was incredibly important then and now. The ramifications of what he did by going to the show is still being felt.
Hmm.
We meet people every day, all the time, who tell us, young people who weren't even born when the show was on, who came out to their family because they watched it on Paramount Plus. So I can't speak enough about it, except to say that unfortunately, 3 months after we finished filming the show, back in November of '94, Pedro passed away. It was not unexpected, but it was incredibly sudden, and we actually thought we'd have more time with him. So
Hmm.
I say all that to say this. After that, I began lecturing about Pedro, going around the country and just giving lectures about what it was like to know him. My former castmate, Pam Ling, started doing the same to a lesser degree because she was busy because she was in medical school. And this went on for a couple of years until it got too hard really to do it. Pam did for a little while, but again, she was still in medical school. She took a little time off, but then she went back to school and became a doctor. We fell in love and started living together. And I was drawing the cartoons for the Complete Idiots Guide series. I was doing my Frumpy the Clown comic strip, and now and again lecturing about Pedro still. But it got to be too hard, so I decided to take a whack at telling his story the only way I knew how, which was with words and pictures.
Yeah.
So I started working on a graphic novel about Pedro. It didn't start as a graphic novel. It kind of was more like a hybrid book, a lot of text, a lot of pictures.
Okay.
We call it hybrid now. Back then, didn't have a name. But the more I worked on it, the more it just became a comic book. Now, again, as I mentioned, I read comic books as a kid, including indie stuff, black and white stuff, Love and
Hmm.
Rockets, Dan Clowes, Jason Lutz, all the usual suspects. I read all that stuff. But I never saw myself as doing comic books until I tried to tell Pedro's story. And it took 2.5 years. A lot of trial and error, starting, redrawing, rewriting. I taught myself how to make a graphic novel. I mean, it just goes back to what Derek had said. I didn't go to school for it. No one taught me how. My lettering was, not exactly by hand. I bought like a lettering program and programmed it in there and then would print it out on stickers and paste it right onto the a limb by scene poster board that I was drawing on.
Hmm.
It was all this old school. And luckily, I got a publisher who actually said, like, I think this needs to be a young adult title. And this is before there was like a lot of YA stuff out there. This is pre-Hunger Games. So it wasn't really a big market. And there wasn't a big market for graphic novels in general.
Hmm.
But I got published and it actually taught me that like this is actually how I want to tell stories. And after the book came out, that's why I decided, like, you know what? I don't want to do a comic strip anymore. I want to try to do this. And it seemed a little crazy to a lot of people, like you're giving up on like being syndicated. I was right in the sense that it was good timing because syndication would take a huge hit right around then. Newspapers were dropping like flies because of the internet.
Yep.
So it wasn't necessarily as feasible to keep doing it. But more importantly, I really felt like no, I think I just want to tell bigger stories. And it was right after I finished Pedro and Me and after the book came out that I started working on Barry Ween. So
Yeah.
again, it's
And I
always called the
definitely have questions about that as well.
yeah. But I'll put a pin in it right there because I've been babbling for
Yeah.
quite a while and I covered a lot of ground there.
Yeah, you did. I'm kind of looking here. You've actually covered a few questions I already had written down.
All
It's
right,
like,
my man. All right.
all right, let me just touch back on the real world for a second.
Sure. We can, it can be longer than a second. Again, I don't want to give you the impression that I have any kind of problem talking about the real world at all. Quite the contrary.
Okay.
I'm happy to talk about it at length. It
Okay.
was beyond important in my life. It is
Yeah.
with me every day.
I mean, literally.
I'm talking to you in the house that my castmate Pamling and I bought after we got married. We've got two
Yeah.
teenage children. We won the lottery. It was an amazing and traumatic experience. I mean, part of it, I think, why and how we could become a couple is that we went through a really exciting, amazing, cool thing that became so hard and heartbreaking, and we went through it
Yeah.
together, and that was how our relationship started.
Hmm.
So that was our starting place. So anyway, so again, I'm happy to talk about any of it. So go right ahead, sir.
So I'm curious, after the show was over, and, unfortunately, Pedro's passing happened so close to that, what did you do to decompress after all of that experience, all of that happening at once?
Oh, I don't think I decompressed for years. That was the thing. It's I can only try to describe what it all felt like. I mean, I have nothing to compare it to. It was my life.
Yeah.
I will say this that we went on the real world, which was supposed to be this fun, stupid, cool thing. We were going to be the coolest kids in the whole wide world for a while. We were on the real world. Conscious of that, conscious of knowing like this is going to be cool. We're going to be on the real world. We're going to be famous.
Right, yeah, because at this point it's the third season, so there's a couple of you've seen
Yeah.
what it's like already.
Yeah, those chuckleheads are famous. This is gonna be fun, And I went into it thinking like, man, the two things I want out of this, I hope I get syndicated, I hope I get my comic strip syndicated, and I hope I get a girlfriend. Both those things happened, and I didn't expect both of them to happen in the way they did at all. It was just all gonna be awesome, and for a little while it was, and then Pedro got sick, and then suddenly it was so heartbreaking. There was so much promise and there was so much fun that was still yet to be had. And he didn't even know how much he affected people and that how much he accomplished with it. And that still breaks our heart.
Hmm.
Maybe more than anything that still kills me is that he doesn't know. He didn't get to experience it rather. To see how many lives he changed and how much he inspired people. And I had no decompression. It was quite the opposite. I threw gasoline on the fire, which was I got to do something. And Pam felt the same way.
Mm.
Like that's why I went When Pedro got sick, he was supposed to go on a lecture tour. He was going to like talk to like 50 colleges, and the suggestion had been made that I could sub in for him. And the truth is, like Pedro did it because he just felt we had no idea what his diagnosis was going to be, and he just felt bad just canceling across the board. And he thought that like I want to offer them an alternative, as you know, just like as a show of good faith.
Hmm.
A lot of them are going to cancel because he said, because frankly, they don't want to hear from you; they want to hear from me. But a lot of them will cancel. He said, but some won't, and I think it's like that you should do it. And he and I talked about what I should talk about. He said, like, so you're going to do AIDS Education 101. He said, but you just tell your story about like who you are and how we met and what it meant to you. Like, and we walked through it, and I just started talking, and that was good for me, and also good for Pam. And then after he passed away, him dying seemed like the last reason to stop talking about him. We should do it more.
Right.
So I just went around. I gave as many talks as I possibly could. I was barely home for like a year, and that got to be insanely hard. And it was after about a year that after that Pam was suggesting that you really need to stop. That Pedro wouldn't want you to do this. You're so unhappy. This isn't this is not a normal life, like going from like college to college to like talk about Pedro over and over again. You're not. I know you feel like you need to do something, and that was very, very hard. So Pam and I moved in together, and again I kept illustrations for the AIDS guys, and then I got syndicated, and we're living in like a tiny little apartment. She's first in medical school, then she's a resident at University of California, San Francisco, and we're fine. We're quasi famous, no longer famous people who have each other. Like she's in medical school. I'm doing my cartoons, and it was cool. It was only when I started doing the book that something finally felt right. I still felt like I should be doing something,
Right.
and doing the book about Pedro allowed me to sort of close that chapter. Not that I wanted to stop telling Pedro's story, but I got to finally tell it here. I don't have to go in front of people and do it anymore. Here it is. This is the best way I know to tell the story from me about him, about all of us and his life and the experience of knowing him and losing him and what that was all about. And when it was done, it's like, okay, you know.
And I just have to grab it real quick here.
Aha!
Point out that
There you go. That's so holding up Pedro and me with the original cover, with the original photo cover, because
Yeah.
my publisher actually felt that. And
Thank
it's
you for
great.
signing it.
I did sign it. There we go. Yeah, it's got a photo cover because my publisher didn't think people would like actually a cartoon book. So like that's where we did the photo cover. Later, 10 years after the first printing, we changed the cover to a more graphic novel looking cover.
Okay. So that's the only autobiographical work I think that you've done.
Yeah.
What are some of the extra layers or complications involved in that kind of story versus pure fiction?
It's funny. I was just talking to another cartoonist about this. When you're doing something like a memoir, the story's there, and you don't have to make things up per se, and
Hmm.
that's what gives you your story. The bad thing is that it actually has to have a story. I haven't done another memoir because thankfully I haven't lived anything of note that I think deserves a memoir. It's all been luckily boring enough that it doesn't make for a good story, and I'm okay with that. Um,
Yeah. We
it's
could use a little less interesting times around here.
right. I mean, it's like it'd be fun if I had something glorious that I wanted to write about, and maybe I will. I don't know what that would be exactly, but memoirs are about that, like a portion of your life that actually is a story that has a beginning, middle, and end. This clearly did. Um,
Hmm.
the difficulties, well, the difficulties for me, I mean, it's again, it's impossible to compare then and now because I had never done it before. I mean, never done it before.
Yeah.
I had not done sequential art. I mean, I tried a couple of times to do a little bit of this and that, but it just didn't work. I had to learn a whole lot. And for Pedro and me, it's like I'm gonna tell these stories. I mean, my lecture were a series of anecdotes, which were basically told chronologically. So it's like, okay, I'll just do that. And initially, I just, again, a lot more prose and kind of a hybrid looking book because it was easier. It's faster,
Hmm.
opposed to drawing every single page, every word balloon, every person, every background, all that stuff. It was very challenging. And and a great way to learn. My 10,000 hours of learning how to do graphic novels was actually by doing one.
Yeah.
So when I did a short story that Oni Press eventually published, which was called
Road
Road
Trip.
Trip, which was the first thing I did right after Pedro and me. And I just had a little idea and I wanted to see if I could do it. And like, that was cool. And they published it. And I really liked it. And then after that, I wanted to do something. My idea was I just want to do something for me that's fun and even a little stupid and and I don't have to like draw any real people and maybe I can make it sort of cartoony. I don't know. And that was how Barry Ween was born. I had, it was a very emotional experience doing my first graphic novel about Pedro and his life and our life and all that. And let me just do, I don't know. So like, coming up with like a quasi superhero story about a boy genius who says fuck every third word and blows things up. Like, this is a good time. And I was just doing it just for me.
Yeah.
And nobody liked it more than Pam. She just loved it. She thought it was so funny. And nothing in the world makes me happier than cracking her up. And I felt funny. I felt like it felt like, oh, this is me. This is who I am. Okay. And it was incredibly important because I was doing stories. And what was interesting about Barry Ween on every level is that I'm writing and drawing it. I got a little bit better writing and drawing it with every issue I did.
Hmm.
And then just somewhere in there, it became a lot more heartfelt and got a little serious,
Yeah.
which surprised the shit out of me, really. It was a natural progression and I just did it. And when it became emotional, I was like, oh, wow. Again, about loving what you do. Like, I didn't plan for it. It just kind of, the stories just sort of happened. And like, okay, I could do this, could do this. Because I love drama and I love, having emotional characters. And I wasn't interested in just like keeping it really shallow and, profane and all that. It just drifted over to being kind of character based,
Yeah.
and wonderful happy accidents. Like, it wound up being this two-hander, where it's like a character's Barry Ween, who's a 10-year-old genius who his entire genius adventure life is a secret, except to his best friend, Jeremy. I just, in writing it, I just needed him someone to talk to. And suddenly it became like, okay, this kid. I didn't even flesh out the characters. You're going to talk to this kid, Jeremy. And it just kind of happened and fell together. And suddenly it became a two-hander, which made sense emotionally and like figuring out later, like, oh no, Jeremy's his best friend and he loves him and he doesn't give a shit that he's this smart. He just thinks it's awesome.
Yeah.
It was incredibly important. It's also why so often I'm useless when giving advice to people about how to pursue a career like this because it's like, oh, I just did things. And it's like, it's like, what does that mean? It's like, well, I just did them and hope someone would care. I just made the things that I wanted to make and I got lucky. And also it's the benefit of being young while doing it. You know, I
But
mean,
I think that that is a good bit of advice is to do the things that you care about, do the things that you want to do.
yeah, yeah,
You know, if you're trying to chase what other people want, you're never going to get there.
it's absolutely true. You got, if you, I mean, it is, something I bring up Pam a lot because she's clearly a very important part of my life. But anytime I had to pivot or do something,
Hmm.
she just always said, like, anytime you love it and you want to do it, it's always worked out. The stuff that hasn't worked out was just things that you had the opportunity and you said yes, and you weren't in love with it and it didn't quite fit. Opposed to when anything ever like came to, she said, like, anything that came directly out of you, it was your idea and you wanted to do it, it's always worked out. It's like, oh, so I guess it's true. So, and it is true. Like, if you love it, go ahead and make the thing. Just make it. Just do whatever you
Yeah.
have to do. Find the time somehow. I mean, again, it's why I always tell young people, like, no, do it now. Do it now when nobody needs anything from you, when no one's relying on you, when you can get by with very, very little. It is like about suffering from your art. When you can just do the thing without having to like pay a mortgage or make sure the kids are taken care of or blah blah blah. And
Hmm.
it's another conversation when you're somebody who does have a mortgage and kids and then you want to try to do this. That's a different discussion, which I mostly say, like, then you need to carve out the time to do it and just do it on spec.
Yeah.
And that's got to be your protected time. And you just got to make it. And you just go ahead and do it. And you just got to keep doing it until it gets done. It's going to take a while. It's harder. but worth it if it happens.
In prepping for this, I reread Barry, all three series,
Yeah.
and at the time you had said you were planning to tell more stories with Barry, Jeremy, the rest.
Yeah.
But at this point, it's been almost 25 years. Do you
Yeah.
think you've definitively closed the book on those characters, or is there a chance that they'll return at some point?
No, there's always a chance they'll return at some point. I do love the characters so much, and I do have ideas. It did. I mean, it did end well in a place where I thought was fine.
I had forgotten that final panel of Barry just sitting there crying.
Yeah, it's sad.
It's
It ends in a
yeah,
little tragedy, that,
yeah,
and I think it's actually a good place then for something so like funny and profane, but it got very, very serious. Um,
yeah.
but I know at some point I've got to tap it. It might happen in the way that I'm doing children's stories. I'm doing all ages stories right now.
Hmm.
And at some point I know I'll get an itch to do something with a bunch of 4-letter words in it. I mean, yes, the thing with Barry's, it wasn't ever particularly violent. It wasn't about that. That wasn't what made it kind of R-rated. It was the language and the mature themes of it. And also that Jeremy was such a horn dog. Like that's also a problem
Yes.
too. Like I wouldn't like Jeremy just would talk about like sex all the time. And I guess I'd figure out a way of doing it that he's still like a little 10-year-old horn dog, which is a little more uncomfortable now. It's a little problematic now. We're in a different world now. Was that all Jeremy was? No, I don't think so. I think there's a way around it or doing it. I mean, Kurt, I guess my point is like, you asked me about it and my mind starts racing. It's still there. It's still totally there. And I know
Yeah.
a lot of fans of Barry Ween like, well, just go do it, man. It's like, I know, but it's not that, I mean, it isn't a difficult thing, but it's a challenging thing. It requires me to take the time to do it. And I'm doing a book a year with Hilo.
Yeah.
I've got 2 books coming out next year. I managed to squeeze out a whole new book series that comes from the
Yeah.
world of Hilo. So I'm expanding the universe a little bit and I like doing it, but I won't lie to any of you. I miss telling a story like that. And it's been a decade of doing
Hmm.
Hilo, and I am closer now to stepping off the treadmill for a little while for, 6 months or a year and trying something else for a little while and then coming back to Hilo. I mean, luckily I've got an amazing publisher in Random House and an amazing editor in Shane Corey who has always said, if you need to go a little slower, if you need to take a break here and there, that, I've thankfully like gotten a lot of goodwill because the series does well and has been consistent. And, I have 11 books out in 10 years. It's like, yeah, if he wants to skip a year, we're not going to give him too much grief. So it's there,
Hmm.
I can't tell you how much I love the characters and how important they are to me because they helped me become a storyteller in every way, just as important as Pedro and me. They had to be the thing that followed up Pedro and me. The memoir, which was about telling an entirely different story. And then this teaching me that like, no, you can just chuck all that and just make something up. And I did, and they're still with me and I'm still an angry 10-year-old boy. So there's no one who knows me who wouldn't be the first one to say, oh no, that's really like, is Judd Barry or Jeremy? Like he's Barry, clearly. He's a grumpy dude half the time.
Oh, that's funny because I always assumed that you were the best friend.
No, I'm definitely Barry. The best friend is the person I need in my life. Another way to put it is that in the Hilo series, I'm DJ.
Hmm.
I'm the very self-conscious, nervous boy who wanted a best friend to drag him along for adventures. And
Yeah. Okay.
and in this case, like I'm grumpy Barry Ween, who's like might be able to do all this stuff. And half the time I don't give a shit about it. But having someone in my corner like, no, man, that's awesome. I mean, I'm Jeremy to other people. I mean, I'm very excited about a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm not entirely one thing or another, but I think of the two,
Yeah.
it goes like that.
So after Barry Ween, we kind of go into the big 2 portion of your career,
Yeah.
where you did some Marvel and a lot of DC. Now, Barry, of course, could be seen as a superhero of sorts,
Yeah.
but you hadn't actually done any ongoing series before you started your work on Green Lantern. How did you make your break into that side of the industry?
once again, a door was open for me and I had to walk through it, just as George for Short told me.
Yeah.
I was at San Diego Comic Con in 1995, not as an exhibitor. I was walking around with ash cans of those are zines. If I need to explain more than that, just look it up. So photocopies of Probably the Clown, just to drum up some interest here and there, drum some business, and maybe if I met anybody who gave a shit, I was going to give it out. And I
Hmm.
was also just doing the thing that I knew would happen, which this is 95 and the real world is still running in reruns. So when I go to places, people would recognize me. And what I got to do, like going to San Diego Comic Con, is like, oh, dude, Judd. And before we had smartphones or anything, so people would like, take a picture with you or ask for an autograph. I'd go like, here. I just give them a Frumpy the Clown zine. It's like, there's one reader. And like on the back said, like, call your newspaper and tell them you want Frumpy the Clown, whatever. Um, and while I was there, Kevin Smith, who at that point had done Clerks, Mallrats, and Chasing Amy, and was hooking up with Oni Press to do a Clerks comic book.
Hmm.
And so he was signing a Clerks Chasing Amy screenplay collection in one book. So I was doing the thing that I got to do a lot, which is I would see famous people that I knew and approach them and say hi. And with any luck, about 30% of the time they go like, wait a minute, I know you, and I get to it like I'd have a legit conversation with somebody that I admired because they knew me from the real world.
Right.
And I liked Kevin Smith a whole lot. And so I waited online. It should be noted it was a long line, but not nearly as long as the lines for Kevin Smith would become at a comic convention. Um,
We were probably standing in that line together.
there you
at
go,
some
man.
point.
Okay, 95, back in the day. And I'm sure it was
Yeah.
I'm sure it was crazy. I'm sure it's like almost 50 deep. We had to wait
Yeah.
almost 15 minutes. Woo! Um, before Kevin was in Hall H. So there it was. It happened. I like, bought the book and like, gave it to Kevin, said, who should I personalize this to? Like, can you give it to, is this right to Judd and Pam? And he said, okay. It's like, I got nothing, no recognition whatsoever.
Hmm.
But when I got off the line, like 15 feet away, I saw someone staring at me who's like giving me the look, like sort of like, are you like pointing at me? And so I walked on over and shook his hand and said like, yeah, hi, how are you? I'm Judd. He goes, oh, hey, I'm Bob. And I said, how are you, man? And he goes, yeah, no, I'm Kevin's editor on this. I'm like, I do any press. I look at his name tag. I said, Bob Schreck. I said, Bob Schreck from Dark Horse Comics. He goes, yeah, I know you read comics. I go, yeah, I read comics. And for those playing at home, so Bob Schreck was Frank Miller's editor at Dark Horse Comics and Matt Wagner of Mage fame and among many, many others. And so I knew Bob and actually it was nice. Bob was actually impressed that I knew who he was, which was cool. And then they were just like talking for 20 minutes and like he had questions about the real world, of course. And I gave him like Front of the Clown a zine and then we're talking. And then he said, like, listen, I'm grabbing lunch in like half an hour. You want to have lunch? It's like, yes. Yes, Bob Schreck, let's have lunch. Which is fun for me because I wanted to ask him a whole bunch of nerdy questions about Frank Miller and Matt Wagner and shit. Like, I just, you know,
Yeah.
and like he's working with Kevin Smith now. This is fun for me. And he wanted to talk to me because I was on the fucking real world. So it was great. Everyone wins. And we did just that. We had lunch for like an hour. And he told me, so like, yeah, we're doing this thing called Oni Double Feature. We're having like a couple of short stories in there. He said, this comic, he said, let me look at the comic strip. It looks good. Like maybe you could do a one pager for us. Like, yeah, I'd love to do a one pager for y'all. An inside cover. I was going to do a one-page Frumpy the Clown comic strip for them. And that's how it started. And then after that, not long after that, I told Bob I'm working on a graphic novel. Would you like to read it? So he read he was like one of the early readers of Pedro and me. And he was incredibly supportive and even said like, you need to get this published by a mainstream publisher. If it doesn't work out, we will publish it, but try to get someone in the mainstream. Like he was my rabbi from the early days, walking me through many, many things.
Hmm.
And then, hey, you got a short story for us for Oni Double Feature? Like, yeah, I think I got some. I did that. You like that? Like, oh, great. And then when Bob left Oni and went to DC Comics, which I thought was great for him, like 6 months into him working there, he finally calls me and said, do you actually like superhero comics? And it's like, yeah, why? What's up? He said, like, you are the only, like, one of the only people that I have worked with who hasn't called me to like work on something. Cause now that I'm here at DC, I could only imagine that that I'm this crabby indie guy who hates comics. Cause like, yeah, even those people are calling me to do something. All my crabby indie guys for sure want to like work on like, hey, I got a Batman story. He said, but he's like, are you into this? Like, yeah, no. And I had to tell him to like, I've read super comics my whole life.
Hmm.
He said, like, I think you'd be good at this. I said like, oh, okay. He's like, And he sent me a bunch of scripts and said, just read them. Tell me what you think. And I came back and said, yeah, I think I can do this. Like, okay. And then he had said that Ron Mars was thinking of leaving Green Lantern. And he said, I think you'd be good at this. He said, so let's do this. Let's take you on just a contingency. Let's sign you up for 5 issues. And I'll run it by, we'll run it by Mike Carlin every step of the way. He said, it'll be like a trial period. It's like, I feel very confident you can do this. And Bob was incredibly helpful and gave me notes and great advice about how to properly tell a story, do a comic book script, which is you're writing a letter to your artist. You're trying to get the art out of them in this way. And as he was I owe it all to Bob. And I didn't even know, like at one point I said, like, am I the regular writer on Green Lantern? And he goes, I don't know. Let me check with Carlin. It's like, and then he I think emails me back at that point. I think it was all email. He said, yeah, Carlin said you're the guy. It's like, oh, okay. It's like I was 5 issues in. Like, no, you got the gig. You're doing it. So no longer on training purposes. And then Green Lantern came out. I was doing it for a few months, and then I got a call from Marvel. And when I got a call from Marvel, they said, so they're pitching me this idea about this team that will be, probably like go into like different multiverses and things like that. And I had to turn around to Bob and say, hey, I got a call from Marvel. Is this cool? And Bob, again, I owe everything to Bob and also a good rabbi, said, I don't see anyone here at DC saying you can't. So go ahead. He said, like someone's making you an offer, go ahead.
Yeah.
And we talked about it later, what Bob was saying that it's like, yeah, you're my guy. You're doing Green Lantern. You're doing it very, very well. And the other guys came sniffing around right away. So he said, the way I saw it, he said, from a professional level, it's like they saw the value in my opinion. So he said, I thought I thought it made me look smarter too. It's like, look how long that took for Marvel to come offering Judd a monthly as well. And then I did Exiles for Marvel for a bit. And when Dan DiDio came on board, Dan was the one who was like, oh, no, bullshit. He can't work for both companies. And it was right around that time that, in a good way, that Dan got the idea of creating exclusive contracts.
Right.
And Jeff Johns and I were among some of the first people, and later Greg Rucka and like all my running buddies got exclusive contracts to write for DC. So Exiles is the only comic that I had to walk away from when I wasn't done. I still had more stuff to do with Exiles. That was the only one in my entire 12 years of writing superhero comics. But that's how it happened. And it happened again because of Bob. He was an incredible editor, an excellent teacher. And not just for me, if you look through the tons of people who he plucked out of doing nothing to, like, yeah, I think he'd be good at writing superhero comics. He always had an incredible eye at looking at people. Like I don't even want to put myself in the league of some of the folks that Bob has pulled out of nowhere and said like, no, this guy would be good. He has a very high batting average, but again, he was always in my corner, always looking out for me. And we did a lot of terrific books together. It was a lot of fun. I mean, I owe Bob
Sounds like
everything. I'm in this house right now because Bob hired me to write Green Lantern, and then I wrote superhero comics for 12 years. That was how I made a living, making up superhero stories, which is like incredible. I got to do that for as long as I did.
Yeah. Now you talked a little bit about it, but since this was your first time writing where you weren't also doing the art, how did that change your writing style?
Oh, I had to learn how to do it. I think what was to my advantage was I was very deferential to the artists in the sense that like I wouldn't like to be told how to do every goddamn thing. Like, I'm not, I mean, there's a couple friends I can mention when they first started out that they like, who also drew, they would do layouts. They would draw layouts and send it to their artists, which later they were told like, stop doing that. It's like, don't micromanage your artists. And I think because I was so new at it, I was feeling very deferential that I would have a lot of description, but not so much that they didn't, that we weren't storytelling together, which is how I always looked at it. And I didn't talk to my artists as much as maybe other people did and do, because I felt like I did it through the scripts. Because Bob originally taught me that when you're writing a comic book script, it is a letter to your artist. You're talking directly to them. So I do. I'd say descriptive things that sometimes like, yeah, that scene of Platoon when Willem Dafoe's running through a jungle, he gets shot and he throws up his arms, that kind of thing. Like, not that, but the feeling of that, that they're they're getting blown apart like in front of like that. And then you see the art that comes out. I spend a lot of time explaining feelings rather than giving an actual, I will say like worm's eye view, medium shot, wide shot, close up, all that kind of crap, but
Hmm.
less than that. And it for me isn't, it was just an entirely different way of storytelling. I always saw it as collaborative from the beginning. When I do my own stuff, I don't write full script or anything. And I write differently because I don't have to, because I know what's going to happen. I know, these are notes to myself. It's just different.
Yeah.
If someone asks you like, can I see the script for Hilo? It's like, no. It's like, and I'm not saying, I'm not being trying to be coy about it. It's like, I can show you my outline. I can show you the dialogue I've written up and the handful of notes. But once I'm actually kind of composing it, the layouts when I'm doing it, I don't break out the panels
Hmm.
the way I do when I'm writing a script for another comic book artist. So it's entirely different, but it becomes an entirely different thing for me, I think, in that the little things I tapped into in Barry Ween when things got very serious and very dramatic, I was actually able to now expand upon in superhero comics because superhero comics are dramatic and action packed and they're not comedies, even though I always put a lot of humor in, which I would run 50-50 with the readers. Some always liked a lot of the humor. We'll call it Joss Whedon-esque, that I had my characters were kind of smart asses. And I like that. There's
Yeah.
stuff I like to read. So that's what I was writing. But they're superhero comics, so they're very dramatic. And I got to scratch that itch in a way that was never, ever going to be satisfied in comic strips. It showed me that I'd made the right decision, that this is the path that kind of like laid itself out. I left comic strips because I told the story about Pedro. And I said, I think this is what I want to do, which led to Barry Ween, which then led to superhero comics, which allowed me to concentrate on drama and dialogue and character. And also the challenge of only being able to tell stories of characters from A to B.
Hmm.
There's freedom of being confined. Let's just take Batman. When you're writing Batman, Batman's never going to grow old. He's never going to die. He's never going to get married. He's never going to kill anybody. I mean, these are things that are stories that you would tell if it was your own character. You'd move him forward. But when I started writing Batman, I was younger than him. Now I'm much, much older. That's how it's always going to be. That's the challenge of superhero comics because you get that narrow piece of real estate, that small piece of real estate to tell that story. They can only go from here to here. So make it work.
Yeah.
And that's a great 10,000 hours to do. I talked about it with Ed Brubaker years ago. I always tell the story because it has a lot of truth to it. Ed was working on, I forget what TV show he was working on, but they had to make some big change suddenly for whatever reason. I don't remember the reason, but it was like a big shift. And Ed quickly said, well, what if we, okay, so okay, John and Leslie are supposed to be doing this. What if they're, instead of doing that, we moved out at the end here. We don't do that thing with Oscar at all because we can't do it anymore. We have Leslie do that. And why don't we have Marco come in and they'll do that and we can pick it up like in the third episode instead. And like everyone's looking at him like he just literally like made an elephant appear. And like, how did you do that magic trick? He's like, oh, superhero comics, And what it is just that like with superhero comics, like, so you can't use Nightwing. Like, I'm sorry. It's like, yeah, he broke his leg and he's going to be, also he's going to be on another planet. Like Nightwing's going to space. Like, don't worry about it. Like, well, I got to worry about it. I'm working on a 6-issue arc and he's in it. It's like, yeah, we can't use him. Well, shit. It's like, well, yeah, it's like, okay, let me think about it. And then suddenly it's not Nightwing. And then someone says, what about Martian Manhunter? Like, I don't want to use Martian Manhunter. Let me think about it. Okay. And then suddenly you work it out and you got to work it out quickly. And then suddenly like, oh no, this is kind of cooking. This is good. This is working. And when you have to make changes, I had the same thing happen when I was working on Hilo. My editor had a note that she thought was kind of a monumental note. And I just said, oh, that's a good point. What if I do this to this and we do this instead? And then I move that to the end. Like, did you know I was going to come? Were you thinking about this before? It's like, no, I was thinking about it now. It's like comic books. It's like that scene in The Matrix where Joe Pantoliano says he's looking at the Matrix
Yeah.
and everyone sees like numbers floating down. I see red. I see a redhead. I see a blonde. I see a brunette. It's like, yeah, you work enough in storytelling and you got to make changes quickly and you just got to do it. It's like there's no recourse. I mean, some cats walk off books because they've had to make too big a change, and that happens. But most of the time, it's like, no, I'll figure it out. But it was excellent training. Superhero comics really, really, really taught me how to be a storyteller, especially when I didn't have to worry about those things anymore. I can make my own decisions.
We'll be back next week to conclude my interview with Judd, starting with one other big DC project I had to ask him about. But this felt like the best place to split the interview up as to not overwhelm listeners with too long of an episode. If your preference is to hear everything at once, you can always become a patron at www.patreon.com/welcome to Geektown for just $1 per month and get the uncut audio from all of my interviews, as well as additional audio content and written scripts from the previous version of the show. If you'd like a free way to help the show out, leaving a 5-star review at Apple Podcasts or other podcast site is always appreciated. Either way, as long as you continue to listen, we'll always say,
Welcome to Geektown. Population? Us.
Questions for the Welcome to Geektown interviews are written by me, Kurt Onstead. I also host, edit, and produce the podcast. Theme song was written by Aaron Lovitz, logo art by Archie Santana.